Up next, it's a wrap. The fourth special session ends with a variety of education bills left for dead. One-on-one, more of our exclusive interview with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Plea deal. State Representative Frederick Frazier pleads no contest to misdemeanor criminal charges in connection to a previous primary campaign. I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas starts right now. Hello and welcome. We begin at the Texas Capitol, where the fourth special session ended with a number of education bills dead. They include the most controversial legislation, taxpayer subsidies for students to attend private school or ESAs, education savings accounts. The House stripped the ESAs from House Bill 1, a comprehensive education funding bill, and left it untouched in the committee. The Senate passed Senate Bill 1, its version of education savings accounts, but it wasn't considered in the House. Governor Greg Abbott's communications director said, quote, "The fight for school choice for all Texas families will continue until it's won." Other legislation that didn't pass includes Senate Bill 2, which would have provided raises for public school teachers and given school districts more money per student. After passing the Senate, the legislation sat in the House for weeks without being considered. And then there is House Bill 2, which created a specific fund that would provide grants for security improvements at school campuses across the state. It would have also required voter approval. After the House passed that measure, it was never considered by the Senate. And lastly, Senate Bill 5. Last Friday, the upper chamber wrote and passed its own separate bill to provide money for school security improvements. It was less money than the House version, but would have gotten to school districts sooner and would not have required voter approval. But the House did not consider the bill. Both Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Speaker Dade Phelan exchanged criticism and insults about each other's ability to pass legislation. And the Lieutenant Governor is pushing back against Democrats and school districts who accuse the state of underfunding public education. We spoke with Patrick on Friday.
It's the big lie, Jack. We spend $1 out of every $2 on public education or higher education. Our whole budget, about 50% of our budget, is on education.
The Lieutenant Governor said that lawmakers approved more money for public schools this year.
Somewhere between a 14 and an 18% increase in funding, just this session.
For every school district, funding is a major issue right now.
But John DeLander, Chief of Partnerships and Intergovernmental Affairs at Dallas ISD, said the money allocated by the state hasn't kept up with inflation. Despite attempts, state lawmakers have not approved even more money for schools, and DeLander said lawmakers have the funding.
They have at least $5 billion, and some estimates are up to $15 billion that's available to them.
He said Dallas ISD recently passed a $186 million deficit budget so that it could provide teachers and staff a 3% raise. How does that work? I mean, obviously, the district has savings that it can draw upon.
There is still some money that's left in reserve.
So why are school districts in our area, Dallas, Plano, passing deficit budgets?
I can't explain how they write their budgets. I can tell you this from some of the knowledge. We have 1,200 school districts. I don't know about every district. But a lot of them spent their money that they got during COVID, and they hired people with it, even though it was one-time money.
DeLander said the district did spend one-time money for COVID, but that much of their deficit budget was caused by more than that. No word yet what will happen with education funding. What did pass during the fourth special session are two controversial border security bills. Senate Bill 3, which will allow the state to spend an extra $1.5 billion, and Senate Bill 4, which will make it a state crime for a migrant to enter Texas illegally. Governor Abbott said this week he will sign the bill in the next 2 weeks. We have covered this legislation extensively during the past month. This year proved to be unheard of in one aspect. State lawmakers, especially the Senate, were at the Capitol pretty much all year because of the special sessions and the impeachment trial of Attorney General Ken Paxton. We went back to see how the 88th legislative session compared to others. And by the numbers, it looks like the 71st legislative session was the record breaker. That was under Governor William Clements. There were 6 Yes, 6 special sessions, but they weren't all in one year. After the regular legislative session in 1989, there were 2 special sessions, and one of them ended December 12th, the latest in state history. And then the next year, 1990, still the same 71st legislative session, there were a total of 4 special sessions, the last ending on June 7th. And many are still wondering if there will be a 5th special session. No word from the governor's office, but we'll keep you posted, as we always do. A state representative from North Texas, who's also a Dallas police officer, pleaded no contest to misdemeanor charges related to his prior primary campaign.
Can we talk to you real quick?
No, we'll talk afterwards.
State Representative Frederick Frazier of McKinney came to the Collin County Courthouse to plead no contest to 2 Class A misdemeanor charges. They involved accusations last year he impersonated a code enforcement officer and removed campaign signs from his then Republican primary opponent, Paul Chabot.
And Mr. Frazier not only cut down our signs, but then he lied directly to the voters, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars slandering my name, saying I made up these charges. And the voters, unfortunately, believe that because of all the money. And I think today, the voters get to hear the truth, they get to see the truth. And
as part of his plea deal, Frazier will receive deferred adjudication for a year and must pay about $8,000 in fines. He didn't speak with reporters afterwards, but his attorney did.
Frederick just made the decision to move on and plead no contest. Have a misdemeanor probation that at the end of the day, it's not going to have any consequences for him for the rest of his life. He's going to have a clean record.
There may be political consequences for Frazier, too. He's facing 2 challengers in the Republican primary for his state seat. Candidates Chuck Branch and Carissa Richardson and their supporters came to the courthouse and want Frazier to step down and not run for re-election.
If he's willing to break the law in order to get into office, then can he be trusted to support the law?
He's lost the trust of his constituency, and he needs to resign immediately.
That's stupid. He's not resigning. Can't attack what he's done as a public servant for 28 years, so they're going to jump up and down about this.
Representative Frazier is retiring from Dallas PD amid an internal affairs investigation. A Travis County District judge has granted a North Texas woman permission to have an abortion. Kate Cox says she was told last week that her pregnancy would likely end in a stillbirth or early death. In addition, Cox says this pregnancy is dangerous to her health and she runs the risk of crippling health issues and potential infertility. Texas law does provide medical exceptions to the state's abortion ban, but opponents say the law is so vaguely worded that doctors are still fearful of providing abortions. The fight over razor wire at the Texas-Mexico border continues this week. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals issued an administrative stay that temporarily prevents Border Patrol agents from cutting wire the state placed at the border to keep migrants from illegally entering the country. In another border-related case, Governor Greg Abbott is seeking a rehearing after an appeals court ruled Texas must remove a floating barrier in the Rio Grande. The governor said he's also ready to take this up to the Supreme Court. Democratic North Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and other Democrats in Congress sent a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland expressing concern the Justice Department is not investigating potential civil rights violations at the border by Governor Abbott's Operation Lone Star. The letter said, quote, "We asked DOJ to clarify its position regarding legal interference of federal immigration law by Texas officials and state or local law enforcement acting under Operation Lone Star." Members of Congress also said, quote, "Undoubtedly, Congress must put aside partisan differences and come together to address the broken immigration system." Now to legal history in the making. The first Latina judge has been confirmed by the U.S. Senate to sit on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans. That judge is Irma Carrillo Ramirez, who has been a federal magistrate judge in Dallas for more than 20 years. Coming up, controversy surrounding a key vote by the Texas GOP Executive Committee when it comes to associating with Nazi sympathizers and Holocaust deniers. We'll speak with the Texas Tribune reporter who first broke the story about an avowed admirer of Adolf Hitler meeting with a conservative activist in Fort Worth. And then later, more of our exclusive interview with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. Sharp criticism against the Texas Republican Party's executive committee after a majority of members voted to remove a clause out of a pro-Israel resolution. That clause would have banned the Texas GOP from associating with anti-Semites, Nazi sympathizers, and Holocaust deniers. The Texas GOP did pass 2 resolutions unanimously. One condemned anti-Semitism, the other supported Israel. Chair Matt Rinaldi abstained from voting but spoke afterwards about the resolution.
I don't think there would be any difference in the way we've operated because I don't see any anti-Semitic, pro-Nazi, or Holocaust denial movement on the right that has any significant traction whatsoever.
Republican and Democratic state leaders have since condemned the vote. The vote comes 2 months after the Texas Tribune first reported the head of a conservative organization, the Defend Texas Liberty PAC, met with white supremacist and anti-Semite Nick Fuentes for hours in Fort Worth. The reporter who broke the story is Robert Downen.
I think it was very tense at times, just from the quotes kind of that we had in our story and that have been relayed to others. I think that there were a lot of SREC members, that's members of the executive committee, who were pretty stunned by not just the fact that they chose not to take up this language, but the fact that there were a lot of people claiming that it was too vague, that they couldn't define anti-Semitism, that this type of ban would, potentially be a slippery slope, to quote one person, for the party and its leaders moving forward. And not only that, I think that particularly stunning to a number of members was before the actual votes against this ban, the language that would have made this ban possible. Roughly half, by my estimation, of the executive committee also tried to have, or also fought against having a record of the vote on the actual resolution language, which I think was particularly galling to a number of members who have been pushing for more transparency, not just on the party's ties to groups like Defend Texas Liberty, but on how it's going to handle publicly these ongoing scandals.
You said that the people who were calling for it were surprised by this, but what were the people who wanted this removed saying?
They were making a number of arguments, but a lot of them basically came down to the idea that anti-Semitism was too vague to define. There was a lot of debate over some language. Initially, it was the ban was on people who espouse or tolerate anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, or pro-Nazi sympathies. There was a lot of debate on what it meant to tolerate, and concerns that this would be a slippery slope, as to quote one member. But also, there were a lot of people who were trying to make the argument that this was something akin to Marxist and leftist techniques of guilt by association, which I think that those kind of claims were particularly frustrating to other members of the committee, some of whom told me, we're having a debate over words like anti-Semitism being too vague, and yet in the same breath, the people who are saying that anti-Semitism is too vague are throwing around words like socialist, communist, rhino, etc.
Was there a recorded vote on, who voted and how?
Yes, there is, and we're still kind of looking through that, but it was 32 to 29 with 32 to 29 in favor of striking the language, so opposed to the ban. And notably, vice chair of the executive committee, Dana Myers, voted in favor of the ban. Matt Rinaldi, who has been kind of, was seen at the meeting where Nick Fuentes was, though he denies meeting him with him. Rinaldi did abstain as well. So, and I think that there were people who wanted the ban, who also took Rinaldi's abstention as kind of, called it a failure of leadership by someone who really has not taken any kind of public stance on most of these scandals over the past 2 months.
I want to get back to the original story that you posted about this meeting with Nick Fuentes at Pale Horse Strategies, which is Stickland's business here in Fort Worth. Did you ever expect your story to resonate the way it did and to really have so much lasting impact?
I think I've been surprised that there has been less done from some parties. I mean, again, I think that it is really worth spelling out here who Nick Fuentes is. This is not some, edgy guy who's posting on, dark corners of the internet. He is the face in many ways of the white supremacist movement in America and in many parts of the world. He is someone who is an avowed fan of Adolf Hitler, who has called for a holy war against Jews, who has instructed his followers to beat women so hard that they fall like a building on 9/11. I mean, he has talked about, fantasized about marrying a 16-year-old when he is 30. He is, I think, a detestable character in his own right. And the fact that there are still people who are trying to undermine our reporting and, poke holes in our reporting and write this off like it's not a major deal, I think has been pretty, I've been surprised by that.
Still to come, more of our exclusive interview with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas. We'll be right back. With the end of the fourth special session, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has had a lot to say about the issues affecting our state. We sat down with him Friday at the Texas Capitol to talk about anti-Semitism, border security, his concerns about the state's electric grid this winter, and school choice.
18 out of 19 Republicans voted for school choice in the Senate. Again, 4 times this year. And in the House, I believe it was 75 or 76 out of 85 Republicans, all but 12.
It was 21 Republicans.
Or 21 Republicans, excuse me. That's right. So 64 out of 85.
Yeah.
Rough math. They didn't vote for the bill. And they are basically saying to the people of Texas, even though it's supported by over 80% of parents, Republicans, 60-some% of independent parents, almost 50% of Democrat parents to pick a school of their choice. These handful of members, including the speaker, say, no, we're more important. Our view is more important. And I thought, and I said it, I thought it was very cowardly of the speaker to not even cast a vote.
I wanted to go back and ask you, because you've been very critical of Speaker Phelan and his leadership. Are you going to support one of his challengers? Are you going to campaign against him?
I don't get involved in House races unless there's maybe a few I support. And that's rare. I try to stay out of House races.
But are you going to support one of his challengers?
No, I said I'm not getting involved. I'm not getting involved in his race. That's up for his voters in his district. The only time I get involved in the House races, and it's rare, a couple that I'll support. It's usually an open seat. I usually don't get involved in a race. But look, if we've got a handful of incumbents over there in the House that refuse to give parents the right for school choice, I support the governor. He's out there. He says he's going to oppose them and field candidates against them. I support that. Look, you've got a handful of Republicans over there for no reason, Jack, except their own bias. I don't even think they even know the issues, except for their own reason. They're stopping a bill that is, I view it as one of the most important bills that we can ever pass for families. And so if the governor wants to take them out, I get it.
So I wanted to also ask you about Senate Bill 4, which has gone to the governor.
Yes.
And the ACLU of Texas has warned that it's going to file suit to challenge it, basically saying it's unconstitutional. And the Republicans are just trying to see what they can get with this new Supreme Court.
Yeah. I just pass bills. We pass a lot of bills. Our job is to pass bills that we believe are constitutional and let the courts decide. My job is not to be the judge and jury of the bill and what is constitutional or not. I've been around here a long time. We passed a lot of bills that some people said weren't constitutional, and the Supreme Court upheld them, and some bills we thought were locks, and the Supreme Court said no.
How concerned are you about the state's power grid this winter, especially after ERCOT canceled this program that was basically encouraging and incentivizing companies to restart their mothballed power plants?
Yeah. Look, I've been on record since Hurricane Uri. We need more power, more natural gas, thermal, because we're not going to get nuclear plants or much coal because of the federal government. But we need to have more natural gas plants. We don't have enough. And we passed incentives, and this would be one of the constitutional amendments that the Speaker's going to kill if he doesn't bring people back to vote on Senate Bill 6. But we put an incentive package together to build more natural gas plants. You know, a 3% loan for 20 years, a 10% completion bonus, a property tax rebate. We need more power, Jack, and I'm very concerned about this winter. Look, I'm easy to work with, but on something that I truly believe in, I'm going to stand my ground and fight for the people of Texas. We need more power. So I tried to do that 2 years ago, as you know, and we didn't have support in the rest of the Capitol. This time we got it through, and we'll see who takes it up. I've convened a major conference on February 6th of people from all over the country, potential investors, to come in and go through these plans so that we hopefully have an uptake to build these plants. But in my view, 2 years ago, what we should have done was taken our money and built our own reserve plants. We should have built them as the state. And people, oh, that's going to destroy the free market. We don't have a free market now in this. So here's the deal. We put together this incentive package. I talked to the governor about it. If we don't get more plants built with this incentive package, then I told the governor I'm going to be back saying we need to build our own plants. We need more power, Jack. We don't have enough.
I was going to ask, what is driving this? Because Texas has been growing all this time.
Yeah.
And so what's changed? Is it all these large data centers that have moved to Texas? Is it Bitcoin? Is it, you know, are they sucking up so much power that we can't keep up?
Jack, it's all of the above. We've added 11 million people here in the last 20 years. And the power, as you talked about, mining for the Bitcoin people, or just all the power, all the companies that have moved here, all the factories have been built. On top of it, just the people live in their homes and need power. So it's all of the above. But the other thing that's happened, Jack, is we haven't kept up with natural gas. So in the last 10 years, we built this much of new natural gas. We built this much of renewables. I'm not against windmills and I'm not against solar, but we have about 85,000 megawatts available to us. On a really bad night in the winter or a really hot day in the summer, we get right there. Well, today, over 50% of our power comes from wind and solar. So if the wind's not blowing and the sun's not out, we don't have enough. So what happened, it was this big push on green, 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 even in Texas. And so instead of keeping up with natural gas, you got a growing population, growing demand, and not building up the base, we call it dispatchable power, that we can depend on. We don't need the wind to be blowing or the sun to be out. And that's what we have to do. Okay.
One more topic, and then this is my last
yes,
question, and that was about, you recently spoke out very strongly against anti-Semitism.
Yeah, yes.
Including the parts of the Texas GOP.
There's no room on the planet Earth, no room in America, no room in the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. I will tell you, Jack, that I think a lot of people have been stunned with the anti-Semitic rhetoric and protest all around the world. You know, I grew up, you know, born in the 50s, you know, studying World War II as a kid, and I used to ask the question, how did the world turn their back on the Jews? How did that happen? And look at the protest today of what some people are saying on our college campuses. So I have no tolerance for it at all. I thought about it. I didn't know it was going to be a big deal. I took $3 million out of my campaign and I bought bonds. And the Israeli government was so appreciative, and because they said, I think this will inspire more people to do it. I bought another $3 million for my campaign. You know, it's sitting in the bank. I invested it in Israel. I put my own money and bought bonds. I've been to Israel. I've spoken to the Knesset in the past. I feel a bond between Texas. We're the Lone Star State. They have a Lone Star on their flag. You know, they have a group I met, Jack, called the Lone Soldiers. And Lone Soldiers are Jews from all over the world. They don't have any family in Israel, but they come to serve in the Army or the Reserve for 2 years. I met them from all over America, from every state. And I thought about that. It's amazing that the Jewish population will say, hey, I'm going to give up 2 years of my life and I'm going to move from Texas or Seattle or wherever it is, and I'm going to go there in my homeland and fight. And I thought about Texas. And I viewed Texas as kind of a country. But if Texas were ever in trouble, Texans from all over the country would come to Texas and fight for Texas. And so I feel a real kinship between not only our country, and the Bible is very clear about this, and those who bless Israel will be blessed. I think it's one of the reasons America has been blessed. But I'm stunned by this anti-Semitic rhetoric, and so we'll do what we can.
Don't forget, you can see our full interviews on our website, cbsnewstexas.com. That's all for Eye on Politics this week. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jack Fink. We hope you join us again next week. Happy Hanukkah to everyone celebrating the Festival of Lights. You're watching CBS News Texas.